Coming up on today's show, there's news about Yakuza, Dragon Age, and, of course, Star Wars Outlaws. Let's do this. What's good, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the What's Good Games podcast, your source for video game news, commentary, analysis, and, of course, the funny stuff every Friday. I am one of your hosts, Andrea and Riana, joined by Mrs. Riana Manuel-Peña.
Hello out there.
And Brittany Brumbacher is here.
Hello, Governor.
Brittany, I just want to jump right in because I cannot wait to hear what you thought about the Yakuza Like a Dragon television series teaser trailer that came out at San Diego Comic-Con last weekend.
It was a glorious moment, ladies. So let me set the scene for you. I was chilling in Eastern Washington where it was beautiful scenery, the big old mountains, the middle of bumfuck nowhere, pretty much. And of course, I completely disconnected, but then I had to watch this trailer. I had to watch it. And Jason later, because he was hanging out with Jace, he came over and he's like, I gotta know what you're looking at. He's like, because you just look so gleeful. He's like, I've never seen you smile this long and this hard for so long. And I'm like, I'm looking at the Yakuza trailer, baby. What the fuck do you think I'm looking at? Yeah. So at San Diego Comic-Con, we got a little minute 15-second or so little teaser, and I'm waiting for Andrea to pull it up if you can.
I can't because it's
TV.
Okay,
that's fine.
We will get content ID'd so fast.
Okay, well, I will pull it up for me then, and I will briefly walk y'all through what we see. Okay, so it opens up, and it's like this iconic scene from Yakuza Kiwami, and it's the scene of pretty much everything that's going on in the city. You see Majima, you see the Tojo clan, you see Nishiki, you see Daigo's mom. I'm gonna leave it pretty vague. So it kind of starts off with just the in-game footage right there. So you're kind of getting a hint of what's the tone, what's the game they're really going to be basing the series off of. Obviously, we know it's Kiwami because of the 10-year gap. But then it cuts into this traditional Japanese tattooing style called Tebori. That's Tebori. And honestly, I didn't even know this existed until I played Yakuza Kiwami, because there's an entire quest where you as Kiryu go to get your tattoo touched up by your tattoo artist. So if you're wondering, what are all these needles doing poking into flesh? That looks very painful. Yes, but it is the way that a lot of my understanding, the Yakuza tattoos were done. And maybe they're still done if you're getting a Yakuza style this day and age. There's no machines used, so it's hand done. So the colors are very bright and vibrant. And then it shows baby Kiryu punching some air in the dark because, of course, that's just kind of what he does. And we start to see the outline of his iconic tattoo come together. Now, there is then this scene of this menacing looking dude. And he is the new casting for Nishiki, and I have his name down. His name is Kento Kaku, and he has been cast to portray Nishiki, and this is Kiryu's best friend. And this was the main reveal, the main tease of this whole panel, right? Is who's the actor gonna be, what character is gonna be, and it's gonna be Nishiki. And if you've played Yakuza 0, if you played Kiwami, that's a very that's such an important relationship to Kiryu that it impacts him throughout pretty much every single game in the entire franchise. So we got the casting. I don't really want to go into too much details why he looks the way he does, because maybe some people will be experiencing this for the first time, but I'm very pleased with the casting. I think he looks exactly the part that he needs to look. Again, it's to show his work. Oh, and then we get this iconic shot of Kamurocho, the Kamurocho gates. So Kamurocho, based off of Kabukicho in Japan, and obviously Kamurocho is a fictional play off of that, but they have the iconic red sparkling flashy gates. They have everything there, and then it just shows this split second zoom through the gates, and if you look on the ground, you can see the trash, you can see all the flashing signs welcoming people into, maybe it's a convenience store, maybe it's a hostess club, or maybe it's a bar. So just from that alone right there, you're oh yeah, they're fucking nailing this. They're nailing everything. There's a glimpse of a hostess club, and I'm saying that because it's all of these all these glasses piled on top of each other. So we're going to be seeing the hostess club. So it's just everything that you would want from this, you kind of get a peek at. We get a peek of Purgatory, which is this underground brothel, casino, illegal fighting arena that plays, again, a huge part through, I think, the first 3 games. So it's just they're not really giving us a lot of context for story. We do know that they're going to be basing this not loosely, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but off of Kiwami. But how they're going to follow it, how closely they're going to follow it, kind of remains to be seen. So as far as, there's a huge surprise reveal there, not really. The only one that I can really think of is maybe we see a glimpse of Shimano, which is Majima's patriarch, which is oh my God, is he actually going to be in there? Of course, they're cock blocking Majima. They're not showing us Majima yet, and that is going to be the reveal of the fucking century. Oh my God. But the thing that honestly got me the most excited out of all of this was after we got this teaser trailer. We got the director of RGG, Masayoshi Yokoyama. And it's actually like it's almost 6-minute clip of him just talking about his thoughts about the show after he saw it. And the clip that stood out to me the most was, quote, aspects of the original's essence are built in everywhere. The game fans who love the original story will understand. The spirit is there. They'll see surprises almost every 30 seconds. Majima in a cone, please. Like, yes, put my boy in a traffic cone. Oh my God, I would lose my fucking mind. I want to see everything. So, I mean, right. So the trailer was exciting in the sense that we saw these glimpses like come to reality, come to life. But then it's this feedback we get from the director. And I literally, as I was sitting there by the pool ladies in middle bumfuck nowhere, I was screenshotting like pieces of his dialogue on my phone because I was like, I have to read this. So these are my these are my screenshots. I have like a few of them. Okay. To be honest, it was so good to the level I was jealous, and everyone's acting was perfect. It shocked me to the core. They didn't neglect the original story, and they created something so new. Like, what? Like, I know this is like what they have to say, and I get it, but still just hearing that, it makes me feel like this can actually happen, like this could actually be fucking pulled off. And I'm hot and bothered and moist in all the right places. Like I just
exciting. Well, the first 3 episodes are debuting exclusively on Prime Video, of course, Thursday, October 24th.
Oh my God, that's so close.
It is.
If there's going to be a premiere, I'm showing up. I'm popping out of a manhole like Majima does. I will hide myself in a cone. I will dress as a police officer. I don't care. I will infiltrate. And you will let me.
Yeah, you better. You better be there. That's all I have to say.
So anyway, I'm just very stoked. Like seeing the community reaction too is really cool too. Everyone's very optimistic about this. I don't see a lot of like, oh, this looks like garbage. So the vibes are good. Very electric. Yeah.
I'm happy for your happiness. That makes me happy. We also got a bunch of news about Dragon Age: The Veilguard at San Diego Comic-Con, which I was kind of surprised about. But I mean, EA has done Comic-Con reveals for things in the past, particularly for Mass Effect and some of their other series. So I thought that it was really interesting that not only did they talk, of course, about the cast and all of the VO talent that is in the cast, who are also on strike right now. We'll talk about that later. But they had some interesting details that they talked about in the panel. So over at Eurogamer, they mentioned one of those details is that there's going to be more dialogue in the Veilguard than in Inquisition, including 140,000 lines of dialogue.
Oh my God.
Up from 88,000 lines that were in Dragon Age Inquisition. So that's quite a bit more.
That is so much more. I think Baldur's Gate 3, not including the main protagonist lines, was like 250,000.
Wow.
And that game is just like that. Yeah, that game's like a whole nother level in terms of like massiveness and size, but just for comparison's sake. But the 80 up to 140, like, yes, like that just speaks to me in so many different levels. I mean, because obviously, like, we all know what happened with Mass Effect 3, right? Like, we know how that ending went in terms of like no one felt like it was bespoke to them, right? And my gut reaction is like, yo, if you have all this dialogue in there, that tells me that you're really focusing on making your decisions feel impactful. And if that means you have to re-record or record a situation like 6 different times to accommodate what it would be for your bespoke character, like that's what they're doing. That's what I'm hoping that means. I hope this doesn't mean, it's just like a bunch of fluff, like, oh, I have to shit in a pot today. Like, no one really cares about that. But, you know, it's just more of like, yo, like, this is how the world is going to interact with your character based off the decisions you made. So we recorded the same situation 10 different ways. And I'm hoping that's what that means. And this is what we need, ladies. Like, I miss this world so much. I've been replaying Dragon Age Origins, and I want to just spread the cheeks and dive in. You know what I mean? I just want to motorboat the shit out of this world. And
wow. Graphic. I'm into it.
You know, that's what I do.
Just get all in there.
I want to get all up in it. Give me all that Thetis. Right. Anyway, very cool. I'm very excited about this, if you can't tell.
And for our Steam Deck girly, Rihanna, it's going to be verified on Steam Deck.
Yes, so I was actually very excited about this news, and I had many conversations with people about it when I found out, because truthfully, I know Dragon Age is a beloved franchise, and there are lots of, spots of shame in my backlog, but this being one of them, it's tough for me to commit to long-term games right now. I really want to play the Veilguard, Dragon Age, the Veilguard,
Veilguard.
Jesus, Dragon Age, the Veilguard. But I have a little baby, and I'm also doing a lot of stuff. So I was on board with giving it a shot, but cautiously putting it sort of lower on my must playlist because sitting at this desk all evening is just not in the cards for me most days. So
Yeah.
when I heard that it would be verified on Steam Deck, I was like, oh my God, thank you. The one request I have, please let me increase the text size. 'Cause
Oh.
my poor little eyes. I have glasses, but I don't want bigger ones. Like, this is as much as I can get on my face. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna weigh 4 pounds in a second. Like, it's tough with some of these Steam games or Steam Deck games because I understand that it has to accommodate all kinds of screens, but I don't think that the size of the Steam Deck is really in consideration when most of these games started development. And it's not always a simple fix to increase the text size. I understand that, especially for bounding boxes, for localization windows. I used to work in that field, so I get it. But please do the work because it makes it so much more comfortable to be able to play it on the go. And I want to give it a shot. And the only way I can do it is if I can play in bed. So
Yeah. No, that's fair. I do think what I'm seeing more and more in terms of options, and I don't know how this really relates to Steam Deck, is they do give you the option to increase subtitle size and text size and UI size. And I feel like EA has done pretty good when it comes to that sort of functionality. But I mean, I agree. And that brings up a problem. Is like, I want to play this game on the go. So it's like, where do I want to play it? Probably PlayStation, because then I have the PlayStation Portal that I can bring with me to bed.
yeah, that
I don't
works.
know.
If only every game had cross progression. That's one of the things I really love about Ubisoft is that, you know, with their subscription, you get that cross progression. I mean, you do have to buy the game multiple times on different platforms, which makes sense. But if I don't have to take my save from my Xbox to my like Nintendo Switch, for example, then I love that for me.
Yeah.
But
I've been Googling furiously, ladies, because I'm feeling like my Baldur's Gate 3 amount of lines is very wrong. I feel like that was, I think that was Starfield. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more or less, but just like, don't come at me, people in the comments. Okay. I'm realizing because I was just reading about Starfield the other day because I had an itch to hop back in and I'm like, we had to. Okay. Anyway, I digress.
Don't come at Britt in the comments.
Don't, please don't. I don't just, and plus I just don't
Leave Brittany alone.
Leave Brittany alone. Leave me alone.
Well, we just wanted to get that news off the top. We know we don't have very much of Britt's time this week, so we're going to actually take a quick break, and then when we come back, Riana and I have some more headlines. But I want to say a quick thank you to this month's super producers, Faris Attieh, Joshua Franklin, and Punkdefied. And I'll have a message from our sponsor, Row, in just a little bit. Britt, I love that we got to see you. Thanks for popping by to talk about your husbandos.
I'm so happy. I wasn't expecting to come on this week, but I'm happy we were able to make it happen. And I love y'all so much. And you'll crush the rest of the show. Make sure y'all listen to the very end. Otherwise, I'll find you. I'll show up like Majima and be like, bitch.
Yeah. She's not joking either. All right. We'll be right back.
Bye.
Let's jump into some quick headlines, or maybe not so quick headlines. Last week during San Diego Comic-Con, SAG-AFTRA, the union behind the voice actors that are featured in many of your favorite video games, went on strike again, this time exclusively for characters in video games. The union is calling for a work stoppage against major video game companies after nearly 2 years of trying to renegotiate its interactive media agreement. The decision to hit the picket lines comes 10 months after the union's initial strike authorization vote. It went into effect on July 26th at midnight. The 10 companies facing the strike are Activision, Disney, Electronic Arts, Epic Games, Formosa, Interactive LLC, Insomniac, Take-Two Productions, VoiceWorks Productions, and WB Games. Worth noting, though, that games that started development prior to September 2023 do not appear to be impacted due to language in one of the legacy agreements made prior to the merger of SAG and AFTRA. Of course, the union is not happy about this, and I'm guessing as one of the reasons that they're still negotiating. According to SAG-AFTRA President Fran Drescher, she said, "We're not going to consent to a contract that allows companies to abuse AI to the detriment of our members. Enough is enough. When these companies get serious about offering an agreement our members can live and work with, we will be here ready to negotiate." In a statement of his own, the chief negotiator, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, said that the video game industry generates billions of dollars in profit annually, and the driving force behind that success is the creative people who design and create those games. That includes the SAG-AFTRA members who bring memorable and beloved game characters to life, and they deserve and demand the same fundamental protections as performers in film, television, streaming, and music. Fair compensation and a right of informed consent for the AI use of their faces, voices, and bodies, and frankly, it's studying that these video game studios haven't learned anything from the lessons of last year, that our members can and will stand up and demand fair and equitable treatment with respect to AI, and the public supports us in that. It's been nearly 2 years since the interactive media agreement was extended beyond its original expiration date to accommodate for more talks between the union and the video game companies. Bargaining has continued on and off for that time, and the union said this weekend that negotiations were ongoing and the parties remained far apart on artificial intelligence provisions. This is such a bummer, Rihanna, after everything that the industry at large, including all of entertainment, went through with the SAG-AFTRA strike, that they are still at an impasse and have to go on strike again.
It is, and I mean, and it all stemming from the use of AI technology in the creative process is frustrating because we've done this already. Like it says in Crabtree Island's statements, like this is not new territory. We've already seen how these negotiations can be like figured out. We've already seen how the language needs to be adjusted. We've already seen that it will eventually bridge the gap and everybody can get back to work. Like the amount of strife this industry is seeing right now, we don't need more problems. We don't need more blockers. And while it is fortunate that perhaps unintentionally productions that are already in motion, that have moved past the stage of the voice actors or the character actors' involvement, don't need to halt, right? Because that is another expense and puts a lot of people out. It's really frustrating that things that are in motion, things that are getting pitched, things that are like halfway through the production or even in pre-production are now just indefinitely on hold for a contract disagreement. Like, come on. like just get it done.
Yeah, and I think what's really challenging about this versus the strike from last year is that the provision about games prior to September 2023 not being impacted means we likely won't see a visible strike influence in this year's or this holiday's marketing cycle. We're not going to really feel as consumers the impact until next year and beyond for games, as you mentioned, that are currently in production. And that's what I think is not unfair, because that's just the language in the agreement. Well, I guess it is unfair, but they did agree to that language at one point, is that the strike last year, like, it was in your face all the time. Like, we knew it was happening on the daily. And now I think I haven't seen very much discourse about this at all. I mean, it coming out during Comic-Con was unfortunate because it got overshadowed by all of the TV and movie news that came out of Comic-Con. And of course, the games that were there were not impacted. So I hope that they can come to an agreement quickly, because a lot of the actors that were impacted by the strike last year are also impacted by this. So that sucks, man. And I think the real thing here is the idea of consent with AI. We had, the wonderful Jennifer Hale on the show last year talking about her opinions on AI, and I thought it was a really impactful conversation. So I highly recommend you guys check out that interview if you haven't. And her saying, like, we want to have a voice and have agency in that. Like, her personal opinion was that she's not against AI. She just wants to make sure that she gives her permission for the AI to use her instead of companies doing it without her consent, which I think is the crux of some of the immovable pillars of the contract at the current time. So hopefully we get some positive updates on that story in the weeks and months to come. Weeks, preferably, not months. Yeah. All right, the other one, which is like another table flip moment for this week. And I have to say, I was not expecting this from Bungie, who already had a round of layoffs not that long ago. Destiny developer Bungie has laid off 220 of its staff, roughly 17% of its workforce, with plans to move a further 155 staff into Sony, forming a new studio. I saw this news come out and I was like, ugh, why? What happened? What is going on over there? And the statement was just was just also a little infuriating. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Pete Parsons, the head of Bungie, put out a lengthy statement in which he recapped why this decision was made. And according to his statement, he said, "We were overly ambitious. Our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began running in the red." Why were they overly ambitious? Well, I appreciated Pete going into detail here. He wrote, "For over 5 years, it has been our goal to ship games in 3 enduring global franchises. To realize that ambition, we set up several incubation projects, each seeded with senior development leaders for our existing teams. We eventually realized that this model stretched our talent too thin too quickly. It forced our studio support structures to scale to a larger level than we could realistically support given our 2 primary products in development, Destiny and Marathon. Additionally, in 2023, our rapid expansion ran into headlong, broad economic slowdown, a sharp downturn in the games industry, and our quality miss with Destiny 2 Lightfall, and the need to give both the Final Shape and Marathon the time needed to ensure both products deliver at the quality our players expect and deserve." What are your thoughts after reading this description of what went wrong?
I've only been a business owner for less than a year and have been in positions of leadership, none anywhere near the level that the CEO of Bungie has. However, if there are problems with how the company has been managed, the workers taking the hit just doesn't feel right to me. They didn't do anything wrong. They did a lot of things really well. You still need the work that they do. And yet they're just chopped. And everybody who's left has more to do now. And it's not just Bungie. It is not just the gaming industry. It is not even just the United States, truthfully. There's a pattern of mistakes in leadership being made across the board and for people completely unrelated to the final result getting impacted because of it, rather than, which we have seen in some cases, leadership taking the hit and distributing the impact across a larger group of people so that people don't have to lose their jobs, or giving everybody the option to maybe take a pay cut for a year so that everybody can keep their jobs. Like there are other ways to spread around not meeting your financial goals than just like firing a bunch of people. There are. It may not be viable for every company or every situation, but this doesn't have to be the answer. And it's really frustrating that we've seen it be the option so many times over and over again. And a several $1 million paycheck every year goes a long way for other people to spread it out. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
I guarantee you, if you've had it one year, you don't need it every year in a row. So it's just really frustrating. Very frustrating.
I'm with you 100%, 1,000%. And I think that's why we as fans of these studios and these developers and fans of these games are continually frustrated when we see these things, because it's once again appearing from the outside. Obviously, we don't work at Bungie. We don't know what it's like internally, but a lot of devs who did work there have been publicly speaking about what it was like, saying that leadership isn't taking responsibility for their choices. And I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to, of like, when I see this statement from Pete Parsons saying we set up several incubation projects, I think that's cool. I think that's important. Innovation and research and development and exploration is crucial to pushing innovation in the video games field. I think that's awesome. But when you decide to do so much of that it now is impacting your core teams and your primary revenue source, so that you are burning money in a section of your workforce that isn't making any money, that you then now have to take the people who are earning the revenue and working on the products that earn the revenue and say, I need to cut your job. It's like, how are you justifying that and explaining that to your workforce as a legitimate thing? That to me feels like a major fuck up.
Yeah, it's a major fuck up, and it is covering it up by like cutting off your own cutting yourself off at the ankles, right? It's like how are you supposed to recoup and get back into a good place if A, morale is terrible, and B, you're understaffed. Like, how do you move forward from that? And I hope to God that the people who are still there have received some messaging around that, because I know it's got to be tough for people who are no longer there, for people who are still around. How do you move forward? That's the question that I have for all of these CEOs who have made these choices, and other leadership who have made these choices and have offered their wall of text explaining why they made the decisions they made. Okay, so what are you telling people to do in the future to avoid this? Yeah. What have we learned?
Maybe tame your ambitions just a little bit. Ambition is important for growth and innovation. But if your ambition is, putting significant harm and stress on the workforce of the people you're asking to help realize your vision and help execute your ambition, then that's a problem. You got to have balance between growth and ambition and also paying your bills, right?
Yeah.
Like it's making sure that people are taken care of and not making promises to staff about, their employment and then saying, well, I really wanted to work on this passion project, but it didn't work out. So I actually have to fire you instead. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part about this Bungie story is seeing so many devs take to social media with stories about what they did. And we talked about this during the Sony layoffs earlier this year and how that was also hard seeing people from studios like Naughty Dog and Insomniac who have continually put out successful commercial
the best games of all time.
games. And then being so that's not good enough. I got fired anyway. And people from Bungie coming from key teams that work on Destiny saying, I did this and this and this for Final Shape, and apparently that wasn't enough to save my job. And it's it's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's it makes you hurt for those people because it's it's not fair. It's just not fair.
It's not. And the continual demoralization of all of the people who make these fantastic experiences is not going to lead us into a good space in the future. So let's find another solution, please.
I want some of these leaders to start taking ownership of their
I would say even I'll go a step further. Financial responsibility.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, you made the bad decision. At the time, you probably thought it was a good, smart decision, and then it didn't work out. And so own up to the fact that that was your decision. And as the leader, you did it and say, I don't want the people who only did what I ever asked of them and did it well to pay the price for my bad choice. Not that hard.
It's really not. And it was also a really good way to attract good talent.
I'm not even saying you need to quit or resign. I'm just saying make it right. Make it right.
You just make it right. Make those people whole. Keep your teams intact. It's possible. I guarantee you could do it if you tried.
Yes. Take some of that creativity you put in one of those incubators and use it in your org chart. Figure it out.
Just dig deep.
You can do it. We believe in you. All right.
I'd love to see it.
Well, we're just going to leave that there. I'm sorry that the headlines weren't more fun this week, guys. But we do have some fun stuff coming up in the next segment. So stick with us. We'll be right back. This episode of What's Good Games is brought to you by Ro. Remember when everybody was doing juice cleanses and was basically hangry all the time? Well, going on specialty diets can be really challenging. But what shouldn't be challenging is finding prescriptions that might be part of your wellness plan, like Ozempic or Wegovy. That's where Ro comes in. Through Ro, you can access prescription compounded GLP-1s with the same weight loss ingredients as brand name GLP-1s at a fraction of the cost. Through Ro's online portal, you can see if you qualify for medication from the comfort of your own home. That means no scheduling doctor's appointments, no driving in traffic and dealing with parking, and no waiting rooms. Ro members have support through the process, so if you're eligible for medication and have questions, you can message your provider on demand at any time. Ro has compounded GLP-1s in stock right now, and if prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in 1 to 4 days. Go to ro.co/whatsgood to see if you qualify today. Membership starts at just $99 for your first month. Medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/whatsgood. Go to ro.co/safety for black box warning and full safety information. Compounded medication is not required to and does not receive FDA review or approval. Prescriptions only. Riana, before I jump into my hands-on time with Star Wars Outlaws and all of the coverage around that game, we got to say thanks to our Supercast elites. Thank you to everybody at whatsgoodgames.supercast.com for supporting the show. This is that wonderful time of the month where we mispronounce your names, and you're such good sports about it. So I'll kick us off with Joshua Franklin.
All right, and next we have Punkdefied.
And Faris Attieh.
Andrew Cotton.
Gabriel Oliveira.
Kelsey Burgess.
Justin Foshi.
Gary Peck.
Steve French.
Robert Frimmering.
Dewey Rees.
Omega Buster.
Noel Navarez.
Patrick Landry.
Gregory Sugano.
Maniacal Mouse.
James Bravo.
Daniel Hull.
Trent Pennington.
Burrito Dash.
Corinne Benziger.
Nicole Humphrey.
And David Strachan. Thank you so much for supporting the show, everybody. Hopefully you caught the happy hour Q&A episode that just happened. And if you didn't, be sure to check for the upload coming soon. Okay, so let's get into Star Wars Outlaws. So thank you to Ubisoft for inviting me out to the event and down to Disneyland. That was a really great time getting some behind-the-scenes information about Star Wars and the franchise from the folks at Lucasfilm and Imagineering. And the context for what we learned about Star Wars Outlaws and the development was really interesting. And I have fantastic interviews with Julian Gerighty, the creative director at Massive, Steve Blank, the director of franchise content and strategy at Lucasfilm, and Nikki Foy, a lead writer on Star Wars Outlaws, coming up in just a couple of minutes. But I wanted to just chat with you about some of my hands-on time for the game. So
yeah,
let's do it. So as I mentioned, I played around 4 hours in 2 different sections of the game. I spent about 3 hours in one section and 1 hour in another. So I got to see 2 different planets. I got to see Tashara and Kijimi. And I'm going to show you guys some of the B-roll here that is just from the Ubisoft gameplay showcase. But in my interviews coming up right after this, I have some of my B-roll, which is kind of fun from my playtime with the game.
Ooh.
So overall, I really enjoyed my time with the game. This was exactly what I expected it to be. I don't think that they're reinventing the wheel here, but they are doing some different things, particularly for Massive. So on screen, you see the expert system, which is part of the progression. And this is one of the areas that I really think is interesting, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. So in order to unlock abilities for Kay Vess, the Scoundrel in this Star Wars story, in this open world action adventure game, you don't have a typical skill tree where you insert points and then you unlock an ability. You have these people in the world that you have to meet and get to know and then do specific challenges to unlock the abilities. I really think that that's an interesting way to do it. It might prove to be frustrating at certain points of the game if there's things that I'm struggling with, but I like that they're doing something different than just like, here's 2 experience points slotted into the tree, which is something we have seen over and over and over again.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So is this feel like it's sort of spiritually comparable to, the Jedi training course that you go through with Cal and with other experiences? Like, since this is not somebody who's known as a fighter, or doesn't have this, lineage of knowledge that they're trying to absorb, is this kind of like the counterpart for that in the Scoundrels world?
I don't think I would make that comparison. Kay as a character starts out a little naive and a little inexperienced and clearly evolves over the course of the story. How she evolves remains to be seen. It's something I discuss with Nikki Foy, the lead writer, a little bit later on in our interview, which you guys will see. But because Kay is using a blaster, essentially a gun, right? But in the Star Wars, they don't call them guns. It's a blaster. I mean, it's a lot easier to just jump right in from a skills perspective than using a lightsaber or Jedi Force powers, right? So that's inherently going to make the gameplay and the whole vibe and tone of the game very different than other Star Wars games, which is something Tim Geddes and I spoke about in our impressions video, which hopefully you guys checked out on the channel. And it's on YouTube, by the way. And so I agree that this is going to appeal to a very specific kind of Star Wars fan or a kind of video game player that maybe wasn't either into the lightsabers or just really kind of wants to see how the blasters are going to work here. But in regards to, the tutorial that you mentioned, no, I think it's a very different vibe. What I really liked about my time here in the open world is that it had a lot of those Ubisoft elements that people know, and if you're a fan of Ubisoft open world games, love to do. Like, you are driving around on your speeder and you come across somebody in the open world and it can kick off a whole quest line. Or you can be in a cantina leaning against the bar and hear some kind of a rumor, and it can also lead you to a waterfall with a hidden piece of gear or treasure behind it. Things like that I really think the world help make the world feel more alive, and that is part of the environmental storytelling that Massive is so good at doing, and they're really bringing to the forefront here. And I am very excited to be able to spend time getting lost in that world. Now, while I was doing the demo, I didn't get as much time to do that because I was very aware of the fact that this was a timed thing and I only had so much that I could potentially do. And so I tried to stay a little bit more on the main path instead of just fully letting myself wander around and seeing kind of what was out in the open world. But I am excited to do that. But I also love that the open world isn't infinite. It doesn't feel so big that it's going to take forever to explore. It feels like I'm going to have a nice, fun exploration adventure, but on a budget, to kind of put it mildly. And I really loved that I had the opportunity to talk to Julian about that editing process in our interview, which we'll go into in just a couple of moments. But just a couple of other kind of quick highlights. The traversal system, which we're seeing here in some of the B-roll, using the grappling and hook, mantling, it all feels good. I do wish it felt a little bit more open, like an Assassin's Creed, where I can climb on virtually anything, but that doesn't feel authentically Star Wars. Or does it feel like it makes sense for a character like Kay, who's a scoundrel? Like, why would she know how to scale all of these mountainsides and sides of buildings, right? So I think that a lot of the criticisms that I saw from early gameplay kind of come back into the fold in the sense that you as a player understand maybe why those decisions were made once you learn more about the story. And I like that they're balancing gameplay with the weightiness of the IP, right? Because, I mean, when you make a Star Wars game, you have a lot of challenges that you have to work around. I don't want to be like, you have IP red tape, but you kind of do. Like, that's a real thing, right? When you're working with a studio like Lucasfilm, they're going to say, hey, these are our characters, our storylines, these are our concepts, and if we want you to make something cool with them, but that inherently comes with, some golden handcuffs, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to make her a superhero. Hello. She it's just not just, but she is a person with a gun. That's it.
Exactly. And that's why Nix is such an interesting part of the game. I agree with Tim's sentiments that we chatted about, that his use in gameplay can sometimes feel a little like muddy in terms of camera controls and button presses. But what you can send Nix to do is so convenient, from unlocking doors to exploding canisters to, releasing parts of the environment so that you can traverse, stealing things, distracting guards, all of that kind of stuff that is really helpful in a companion pet. And I am really interested to see their origin story and kind of, where Nix and Kay originally crossed paths and like why Nix is hanging out with Kay. And hopefully, we'll get to see more of that story in the game when it unfolds. But I didn't think that, the way that they implemented Nix was overdone. I think that it felt good. It felt like, I want my little buddy hanging out with me. And he rides on your shoulders when you're going, up and down ladders and stuff. He's cute. I really liked him. I think overall, like, my sentiments about my time with the game really are positive. And I think that this game is presenting itself exactly what I hope it to be. Obviously, we've had some instances after preview events where the final shipped game is different than the game that we saw in the preview, but my gut doesn't tell me that's going to happen here. And part of that is because I've really enjoyed all the games I've played from Massive as a studio, and they, haven't done me dirty yet, so to speak. And so if the game is what I played in the preview event, I'm going to be very happy. And I think gamers who like Star Wars and who like blasters and who like these alternate stories in the Star Wars universe are also going to be happy.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but I do appreciate that it is a departure from, the Force and all of the chosen people. And not like, this is just some folks doing what they got to do. It's a little more grounded. I think that can connect with potentially even more in of an audience. So I'm looking forward to this maybe even more than the last couple for that reason, because I'm a little bit more meat and potatoes in the story world. So I think it'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to see how the syndicate system is going to play out. People are likening it sort of to like the GTA reputation system, and I don't think it's that involved. But the idea that you have multiple crime syndicates that you're working for, and you can choose to take a job with one and not the other and play them against each other, withhold information, deliver goods to one and not the other, and kind of build your reputation ranks among specific syndicates is something that I thought was really fascinating. And I'm eager to see how that's going to play out long term. In my demo, I got to have one dialogue option where I could choose to withhold a piece of information, or I could choose to give it to my syndicate contact, and that would change my reputation with each of those syndicates and have a gameplay consequence later on. That kind of stuff I find really exciting and is narratively interesting and provides replayability, but I didn't get to see exactly how it's going to come full circle in my time playing. Again, that's more of a review kind of topic to dissect than a preview, but I like that they're doing it, and I'm interested to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah, that'll be exciting to see if it's like as innovative and impactful as like Shadow Motor's Nemesis system, right? If it's something that could potentially carry into other titles, because it's always fun to see something new. We've seen so many games.
Exactly.
It's hard to come up with a new concept, so I'm looking forward to that part too.
Yeah, I want to play it, and it's coming out very soon at the end of August, and everybody should clearly make their decisions for themselves, but check out all of our coverage. I had a great conversation, like I said, with Julian and Steve, so I'm going to kick off those interviews, and if you guys have specific questions you'd like me to answer about my time with the game, feel free to drop them in the comments below or tweet to me, and I'll do my best to get you those answers. But for now, enjoy these interviews. What's good, everybody? Andrea Renee here on site at the Star Wars Outlaws preview event, and I'm joined by Julian Gerighty, the creative director at Massive, and Steve Blank, the director of franchise content and strategy at Lucasfilm.
We did
I got it. I was really worried about messing that one up.
That was great.
Thanks so much for joining me. Such a fun event, getting so many hours of hands-on. But I want to start our conversation talking about the word scoundrel.
Sure.
Star Wars Outlaws, as been said many times over, is a scoundrel story. So you guys have been working together on this game for a little over 4 years now. Is that accurate?
Yep.
So when you guys say the word scoundrel, what exactly does that mean?
It comes from certain Star Wars archetypes. And we were looking at the paper RPG game. And the one archetype that we wanted to lean into was the scoundrel. And of course, that's an outlaw, it's a smuggler, it's a space pirate, it's all of those things rolled into one. And it really became the rallying cry, that first pillar of the game experience that we wanted to explore.
And it's got such a specific, distinct meaning and context with Star Wars. Obviously, it's a real word and exists in other contexts. But for us, when looking at things like role-playing game or when looking at other Star Wars stories we've told, it's not a bounty hunter story, it's not an assassin story. There is a specific context to the scoundrel in the underworld in Star Wars that we found really compelling and really interesting and thought would move into wonderful gameplay experiences.
So are there specific pillars of gameplay that you wanted to make sure that you guys hit when you were in like your pre-production phase in order to feel authentic to that vision of what a scoundrel is?
I think so. I think just starting with those three words, open world and scoundrel, multiplies the different kinds of opportunities we're going to offer to the player and the agency that they can exert in that open world. Scoundrel, open world meant we were going to give the player a ship, a speeder. We were going to give them a blaster, of course, but a stun gun, give them the ability to stealth, give them the ability to spy with binoculars. And all of these action verbs basically linked together to create something that was very rich, despite the fact that Kay Vess doesn't have superpowers. She doesn't have the Force. She's a scoundrel.
She's kind of squishy, actually. Yeah.
Precisely.
She is kind of squishy. Yeah, the game's a little challenging at the moment. Yeah, for sure.
I just have to get good, right? Stop alerting the guards all the time, Andrea. You can do it. I love that, though, because Massive has such an amazing history with open world gameplay. No surprise to anybody who watches the show that I'm a big fan of The Division, and we had the What's Good logo in The Division 2. It was a very fun moment for us. But how did you guys take all of those learnings from the development that you as a studio do on open worlds, sprinkle in a little bit of the Ubisoft formula of open worlds, but also like not overdo it because Star Wars is big, right? There's a lot to pull from in kind of editing down your vision.
What we love to do, one of the things that I loved to do the most was the visual design of the world. In The Division 2, narrative isn't easy because it's non-linear, it's co-op focus, so telling that linear narrative story is very difficult unless you rely on the world to tell you a lot of those stories. So there's a lot of care and attention built into the world and built into exploration of that world. And that's something that we brought to the fore for this game. Now, in terms of the other open world elements and the fact that this was a single player game, that allowed us to really flex other muscles. We've never done vehicles before. So doing a speeder and a ship, that's a stretch. We've never done progression in the sense that we're doing it in this game, which is all about the experts, all about going into the open world, finding these people, doing jobs for them, building the relationship, and then improving yourself, improving your speeder or your ship. So it's a very different approach from what we've done before or from what Ubisoft games have done before.
Sure. And I think I can tackle the breadth of Star Wars piece of it in terms of how do you, I guess, self-edit when you're going through the process of defining a new story. How do you find the right places, the right characters, the right narrative without it becoming...
Budget does that for me.
That's exactly where I was going to go, where the reality of what can be made and what can be built actually provides a very helpful box sometimes of we need to fit in this context. So how are we efficient and effective and sort of on story with our choices in those areas? And so the production realities play a major factor in, okay, how are we defining the specificity of what we're making?
Absolutely. And from day one, it wasn't meant to be an epic 300-hour game. It was meant to be dense with activities, very rich, a roller coaster ride of a main campaign. But 25, 30 hours for the campaign, much longer if you want to do all of the side activities too.
God bless you. We don't have time for 300-hour games. There's just too much going on in the world today. When you had made some public comments about the length of the game, I think everyone at What's Good was like, yay, it's not going to be so long. But there's so much baked within the universe. Steve, from your department in the team at Lucasfilm, when you are beginning a relationship with someone like Julian and the team at Massive, the symbiosis obviously has to be there. You have to like each other first, right? Yeah. But then, you know, how is...
Yes.
You're like, this is going to be a long 5 years if we don't like each other. How is the process between, you know, the team at Massive saying, hey, we want to implement this feature, and then your team at Lucasfilm saying, that sounds cool, but doesn't feel authentic to us? Or have you thought about how you're actually going to make that thing work?
Yeah. That's the questions you asked just summed up the exact exchange, right? Which is we will put our heads together conceptually, talk about these ideas, this 3 words, open world scoundrel, start to sketch out what that means, where we want the story to take place, and then roll into, okay, execution. How are we going to make this? How are we going to build this? What are the elements we need? And that becomes an ebb and flow as they're working at their studio to go, what can we make? What feels fun? What feels good? And they'll bring it back to us. And those are the types of questions that we would ask of, does this feel like it's grounded in the Star Wars specific fantasy? Great, check that box. Does it feel like a really good mechanic, but it's missing Star Wars flair? And sometimes there are those moments where something might not work exactly as realized or as pitched, and then it becomes the conversation. What's the idea behind the idea? What were you trying to solve with this, or what were you trying to implement? And how can we put our heads together and say, let's solve the game need through the Star Wars lens?
I did like Naveed's comment during the panel today about how Nix was such a great solve for some of those, like, how are we going to fix this problem that we've kind of backed ourselves into? So let's talk for a second about Nix. He's obviously a big part of this game, and it's part of the duo of Kay and Nix, and Star Wars has had a lot of famous duos over the years. Is that something that has been part of the Lucasfilm identity for Star Wars since the beginning, this idea of, like, we just love duos?
I think the idea of partnership, companionship, crews, duos. Sometimes it's specifically a duo, sometimes it's a trio, sometimes it grows out. But that idea of family, essentially, is such a core central theme throughout all of Star Wars storytelling. And Kay and Nix as a duo represent a family for the two of them and the life that they're living in the Canto Bight Workers District. And so, yes, I would say that thread was really important, was how do we find that type of companionship for Kay as we're developing her story so it feels of what we know and how we interact with Star Wars characters.
So, true story, in our first playable, which is a year and a half after we started working, there wasn't Nix. Nix came afterwards.
Oh, interesting.
Nix was a solve for a gameplay need, which was Kay doesn't have powers. We want this fluidity in gameplay, in tackling the battlefield. So how do we give her superpowers? An extra long, Mr. Fantastic type of arm.
Go gadget arms,
Exactly.
right?
Go gadget arm. Staying in Star Wars. And of course, we started thinking, and the soft values of Nix came much later. But it was a gameplay need solved in the most adorable way possible. And that's important too.
And it's, to what you referenced to what Naveed was saying on the panel, it ended up playing such an important part in the story. It ended up solving a need that we were coming to as we were developing the narrative as well, of we needed somebody for Kay to be able to play off of a little bit, to have that dynamic and relationship and rapport with, even as a pet. And so Nix came from that need for game design and then fit beautifully in with the story.
No one likes a lonely protagonist, right? You're just traversing the beautiful grasses of Tashara all by yourself.
All by your lonesome.
That's a game I'd play.
I mean, a lot of gamers, I think, would also play that game. So, maybe tuck that one away for the future.
For later.
You talked, Julian, a little bit about how the team at Massive was really kind of stretching themselves from a design and coding and all over development perspective for this game. You guys have been very busy over the last 5 years, doing quite a few different titles. What was it specifically about working on Outlaws that was very exciting for you, leading the team, having been at Massive as long as you have, watching the people that you've worked with do cool, new, nerdy dev stuff?
I think that the two huge dev challenges that we were super passionate about, that were intertwined with the essence of the player fantasy, are one, the seamlessness, and being able to get into your ship, to blast off into orbit, and to have the living world activities in orbit as well. All of that seamless, that is an incredibly difficult challenge. And I think we did a really good job there.
I thought it looked pretty good.
I think we did okay.
I think they did well.
And the second thing is the lens project, which is a camera lens that we developed inside of Snowdrop to create this emotional resonance with the movies, the original trilogy movies, and your experience watching them on the silver screen or on VHS. So it's packed with different things. It's basically replicating an anamorphic lens with the barrel distortion on the edges, the vignetting, the chromatic aberration, the film grain, all of those little things that you can turn off and on as you want, but it's almost subliminal, communicating this cinematic experience. And that's something day one we wanted to do.
I certainly took quite a few slow-mo pans when I was doing my gameplay capture today. I was like, look at the particle effects. It's so cool.
So beautiful.
Star Wars, though, has been around for several decades at this point, and there's been a ton of different video games in the Star Wars universe. Steve, from your perspective, do you sometimes get a little worried that gamers in general are maybe getting a little bit of franchise fatigue, or you're like, they just can't get enough?
I think without putting words into everybody's mouth, I think the context is every individual has a different relationship with storytelling worlds or with franchises, and some people have different barometers for how much or how less they want to engage with something. The intention behind each new story that we craft is that there's a new perspective, or there's a new element, or there's something fresh and intriguing about the specificity of the story in that individual piece of content, whether it's a game, whether it's a comic, whatever that is. And we're always trying to lead from that lens. And in the game medium in particular, it's about the marriage of that story that feels unique and fresh with new game design elements, with something that is bringing to fans who want to engage and have fun with it, something that maybe they haven't seen before or seen in a long time.
I mean, I certainly haven't played a Star Wars game like this before, so
Yeah.
I guess, Chuck, you did it.
Yay!
Any final thoughts?
We really, really wanted to do the source material justice, and I think we have something very special. So I'm very, very proud of what the teams have done. It's been so fun seeing people play, enjoy the sort of cantina atmosphere that we've recreated, and get to grips with the open world, which was something that everybody wanted to see after Forwards. And I think that's what they played today, and it seems like people really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, I crash my speeder all the time. I just ran into stuff constantly. It's going to be great. Well, guys, thank you so much for chatting with me today here at the event, and we look forward to seeing more from Star Wars Outlaws. What's good, everybody? Andrea Renee here. I am about to chat with Nikki Foy, the lead scriptwriter on Star Wars Outlaws, and I'm so glad that we get a chance to chat today because I have questions, Nikki.
Ooh, I'm excited to answer. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what has been really awesome about the preview event here today is getting to spend more time with Kay, the lead protagonist of the game, the scoundrel of the story. And I wanted to chat a little bit about what was important for the story team to really get right about Kay as a character and being a scoundrel, but also not like copycatting who Han Solo is and who the other scoundrels in the universe are.
You know, the scoundrel word comes from an exchange with Han, obviously, so he comes to mind. But honestly, for us, it was more about creating a character that we hadn't seen yet who wasn't a Jedi, wasn't part of the rebellion. Han says he's a scoundrel, but he's kind of a rebel, honestly. And for us, having Kay not be that was really important. She is a normal person who doesn't want freedom for the galaxy. She wants freedom for herself at the beginning of her story. And finding those differentiators, thinking she knows what she wants versus what she needs, and really pushing her to be the most scoundrelly that she can. This outlaw that's becoming a legend, you know, starting from her naive fumbling through these situations to, you know, becoming a very competent thief. That's what we were really excited about. So we would always try to come back to that when we thought of her.
I'm glad that you brought up the naivety, because when I was playing the early parts of the demo, I kept thinking like, man, I feel like she's supposed to like know what she's doing, and she does feel like, I don't want to say bumbling, because that's not a appropriate or accurate characterization of who she is as a character, but I'm so curious about where her arc is going to go from, you know, a narrative and a gameplay perspective. This idea that she's supposed to be a criminal, but she still feels kind of like not confident yet.
Kay isn't confident at the beginning. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's never left Canto Bight. She grew up in the workers district of Canto Bight, so the least glamorous thing on the most glamorous planet. And she spent her whole life running little scores and trying to trick people out of small, like, petty cash, basically. And now she's thrust into this crazy big galaxy, and she doesn't have any experience. So it's really fun to watch her grow throughout the game. It was one of our favorite things to write. Depending on the order you do things, Kay will be more or less confident or more or less friendly to certain characters. Having that growth to see, Kay talks a big game. And that was something that Umberly brought to the character that we just loved so much. She was so good at having Kay just talk her way through something in a way that was so obviously fake confidence. So that's where we really wanted to start. And Kay is going to do the heist of the galaxy. You know, that's what she's aiming for. So we really wanted to have the character grow with the player as they learn new skills, as they get more confident in the game.
One of the ways that story unfolds in Outlaws is nonlinear, and the idea that players can choose to go to planets almost in any order that they want. How is that going to impact the way that the main campaign rolls out for players? Is there going to be like the one true playthrough?
No, there's not going to be a one true playthrough. For us, we really wanted to capture the feeling that the original trilogy gives you with that narration, that beautiful arc with these strong emotional points, and that was a real focus for us. But we didn't want people to have to do something in a certain way. So everything can be done in any order, and depending on the choices that you've made, how these things happen, how they unfold, how people treat you, how the world reacts will be very different. So I'm super excited to see all the like weird combinations that people come up with these like lighthouses in the middle of Kay's journey, feeling narratively satisfying.
I thought it was really interesting, this idea of the syndicate system and the reputation that you have to build with each of the individual syndicates, and how certain things are going to be available or certain gameplay scenarios will be different depending on what your reputation level is with the syndicates. And I think what people ultimately want to know is like, how dramatic does that impact actually get? Is it going to be like, my gosh, my ending of the game is going to be like incredibly different? There's like 25 different endings or whatever? Or is it like branching paths that all kind of converge back together?
Yeah, so sort of what I was talking about before is having these lighthouses, having this satisfying ending that works for Kay. So we really wanted to deliver that, but how it happens is what's going to be changing. And we have some great narrative designers on our team who have really thought about all these little things, like if I go and talk to Gorak, who's the Pike underboss, and my reputation with him is terrible, he's not gonna love that, right? So all these little moments that we could add and then make the world react to the way in which Kay is achieving these lighthouses that the player will get to in between.
Okay, so when you use the term lighthouse,
Yeah.
is that like dev speak for a specific pillar of like gameplay and story coming together? Because it's not like a literal lighthouse.
No,
right?
it's not a lighthouse. I guess I'm speaking all writerly.
Peel back the curtain for us,
that's
Nikki.
right. I just mean like something that's drawing you towards it, right? Like this is the thing you can see, you know where you're going, where you're headed.
Like a main quest line.
Sure, or like the result of a bunch of quests, right? So it's all about how you do it and have that satisfying moment with Kay. So there are the in-betweens and then the world around her.
When we're talking about the narrative arc and the branches in the game, you have these situations where you can choose to pick like one option or another at the cost of potentially making one of your, syndicates that you're trying to earn favor with mad at you, but then the other one is happy. Are there going to be points where some of those situations are like irreversible?
The player has lots of options of which syndicate they want to align with. There are choices that absolutely they remain the way that they are for the rest of the game, but there's lots of opportunities. There's contracts, and you can do special work for syndicates. You can help them out
Like
in the
extra
world.
credit.
Absolutely, extra credit.
Okay.
Or if Kay just wants to pick up a few bucks, she can choose who she's going to work for in that moment, and maybe they like that, maybe they don't. So there's lots of different ways that the player can earn back their reputation or ruin their reputation. There's a lot of ways to ruin your reputation also.
Is it one of those situations where you can ruin your reputation so bad that nobody wants to work with you at all anymore?
Absolutely.
And you can't like buy things at a discount anywhere?
Absolutely. Yep, 100%. Everyone can be hunting you down and wanting your head, so.
Doesn't really feel like a fun way to play the game, though, if I'm being honest. Is replayability a big part of that narrative system and this idea of being able to choose? Because I think about how gamers love narrative story choices and the idea that, I have to go back and play again because I want to make a different choice in that scene. Would you guys say that there's a lot of opportunity for that in this game?
The way in which you can solve problems is so different. Besides even stealthing and blasting, there's just so many fun gameplay ingredients that you can explore and experience that when I play the game, I constantly find new ways to do things, which feels really gratifying. In terms of story, yeah, absolutely. There's content that you'll miss on one playthrough that if you want to see it, the only way to do it will be to make different decisions. That's definitely something that we're super happy is in the game.
I was chatting with Steve from Lucasfilm about the history of duos in Star Wars and how there's just so many iconic duos, Han and Chewie and Luke and R2 and whatnot. For people who are working on what that means for story and narrative, like, is that a really awesome, kind of flexible character that you get to work with? Or do you kind of feel like, we only really can use a character like Nix in specific story ways?
This is a good question. We had a lot of iterations on Nix and how much he could understand Kay and how much Kay could understand him, and is he sentient? Does he have opinions? All these things. And we really settled on Nix being this reflection of Kay, being like her little pal throughout the whole thing. Naveed always says that he writes Nix like his cat, and I write Nix like my dog, and Bogdan, the cinematic director, directs Nix like his dog. And so we have all these really fun crossovers to make this alien creature that we all see in a different, lovable way. And it really is a great narrative creative tool to have Nix for a million reasons. One being, Umberly talks about this all the time, but him being the emotional center. If Kay is closed off, we can see how Nix feels about something. That's huge for us. If we need Kay to do something, Nix is always going to be her top priority. So if Nix gets into trouble, if something's up with Nix, we know exactly what Kay's going to do. She's going to help him out of that situation 100%. And also, the thing that I love about Nix so much is that it gives us the opportunity to push Kay as a scoundrel, because she has this element to her that is so soft and so sweet and
It's a
vulnerable.
weakness. Just admit it. She can't be hard.
Nix is a weakness in a good way.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs like that empathy and that love and
The humanity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to show Kay with Nix, it's such an easy, instantly understandable way that like this is a good person. She's gonna do things for herself. She's at the beginning she knows what she wants and she's gonna try to get it. But really, you can see that she isn't selfish. She has this little guy who's her family.
Are we going to get to see how their beautiful friendship came to be in the game?
Maybe.
Because I need to know, like, how do you find a creature like Nix and then Nix just hangs out with you forever?
Yeah, we're really excited to show you Kay's backstory. So
Okay, cool. No spoilers, of course,
no
anybody.
spoilers, absolutely.
Discovery is important.
Yeah.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. August 30th is when Star Wars Outlaws is out and ready for you to play. Bye, everybody. Thank you again to Ubisoft for having me at the Star Wars Outlaws preview event. And Rihanna, it was so good to see you this week.
Oh, it's good to see you. We got a quick Brittany cameo for the week.
Yeah, we did. Oh, always talking about those husbandos.
I mean, they're worth conversation.
I know. It's part of my plan to be able to play some of those games so that she and I can talk about them. But I mean, there's just so many of them now.
It's definitely quite the deep catalog that you've got to get through.
But I can at least watch the show, so we'll have that.
There you go.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you want to help support the show, leave us a 5-star review. Follow, subscribe, maybe tell a friend about our podcast. Every little bit helps. We love y'all. Have a great weekend. Bye.